World War I, also known as the Great War, forever changed the course of history. But what caused this catastrophic conflict that claimed over 16 million lives? The answer isn't simple. It's a web of alliances, rivalries, and a single fateful spark. From the assassination of an archduke to the complex network of alliances that drew nation after nation into the abyss, we'll try to understand how the world sleepwalked into the abyss. In this video, we'll break down the key causes of World War I. Imagine Europe in the early 20th century, a mosaic of empires, ethnicities, and simmering resentments, a powder keg waiting for a spark. The continent was a complex web of alliances and rivalries, each nation watching the other with suspicion and ambition. Nowhere was this more true than in the Balkans, a region already scarred by centuries of conflict. The Balkans had long been a melting pot of cultures and religions, each with its own aspirations and grievances. The Ottoman Empire, once mighty, was fading, creating a vacuum that other powers were eager to fill. European powers like Austria-Hungary and Russia saw opportunities to expand their influence. The Austro-Hungarian Empire saw its dominance challenged by rising national identities within its own borders. These national identities were fueled by a growing sense of ethnic pride and a desire for self-determination. Serbia, a small but ambitious nation, dreamed of uniting the South Slavic people, many of whom lived under Austro-Hungarian rule. This dream was not just a political goal, but a cultural and emotional mission for the Serbian people. Add to this mix the Russian Empire, seeing itself as the protector of the Slavic people, and you begin to see how the Balkans became a tinderbox. The region was a hotbed of political intrigue and nationalist fervor, with each faction ready to ignite the flames of war. The stage was set for a conflict, but it wasn't just about territory, it was about the rise of nationalism. Nationalism was a powerful force, driving people to seek independence and assert their identity. This potent ideology was spreading like wildfire through Europe. It was a time of great change and upheaval, with old empires crumbling and new nations emerging. In Germany, nationalism manifested as a desire for recognition on the world stage. The German Empire sought to assert its power and influence, challenging the established order. In France, nationalism took the form of revanche, a thirst for revenge and the recovery of lost territory. The memory of past defeats fueled a burning desire to reclaim what was lost and restore national pride. Now, you might think that with all this tension building, the great powers of Europe would have done everything in their power to avoid war, right? They had seen the devastation that conflicts could bring, and surely they would want to prevent another catastrophe, to step back from the brink, to find a way to resolve their differences without resorting to violence. Well, that's where it gets really tragic. Instead of finding peaceful solutions, they entangled themselves in a web of alliances. These alliances were so complex, so convoluted, that it's a wonder anyone understood them at the time. They were meant to create a balance of power, but they ended up creating a tinderbox. Imagine this. On one side you have the Triple Alliance, a pact between Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy. They promised to support each other in case of an attack. On the other side you have the Triple Entente, an alliance formed between France, Russia and Great Britain. They too pledged mutual support. These alliances were supposed to deter aggression, to make potential enemies think twice before attacking. The idea was that no single nation would dare to provoke a conflict that could escalate into a full-scale war. But here's the problem. These alliances were based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how things were going to play out. They were built on the assumption that any war would be short and decisive. The architects of these alliances imagined a short, decisive war. They thought that any conflict would be over quickly with a clear winner and loser. But what they failed to grasp was the sheer scale of modern warfare. They didn't understand how technology had changed the nature of war. They didn't anticipate the devastating power of machine guns, which could mow down soldiers by the hundreds, artillery, which could obliterate entire battalions, and poison gas, which brought a new level of horror to the battlefield. They didn't foresee the horrors of trench warfare, the millions of casualties, the years of stalemate. The war dragged on far longer than anyone had anticipated. And so these alliances, intended to prevent war, actually made it more likely. They created a situation where a conflict between two relatively minor powers could drag in all the great powers of Europe. The result was a war that engulfed the entire continent, leading to unprecedented destruction and loss of life. The tangled web of alliances had set the stage for one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. Now, imagine yourself transported back to the years leading up to 1914. Picture the streets of European capitals filled with the rhythmic marching of soldiers, their boots pounding the pavement like a heartbeat. It wasn't just the alliances that were pushing Europe towards the brink, it was also a pervasive sense of militarism. In Germany, the Kaiser, obsessed with military might, poured resources into building a massive army and a powerful navy. In Britain, the Royal Navy kept a wary eye on Germany's growing fleet. Across Europe, the gears of industry were turning, churning out weapons of war. It was an arms race of unprecedented scale, driven by fear, suspicion, and national pride. Each nation believed that its security depended on being stronger than its rivals, and so they poured money, resources, and manpower into their militaries, creating a climate of fear and paranoia. Chapter 4. The Scramble for Empire. Now imagine a map of the world in the late 19th century with vast swathes of Africa, Asia and the Pacific all coloured in the hues of European empires. This was the age of imperialism, when European powers carved up much of the world like a pie. Great Britain stood as the preeminent imperial power, its colonies stretching across the globe. France sought to expand its colonial holdings in Africa and Southeast Asia. Germany, a latecomer to the imperial game, felt entitled to a place in the sun. This competition for colonies fueled a dangerous rivalry between the great powers. It was a rivalry that played out not only in the halls of diplomacy, but also on the battlefields of far-flung colonies. This wasn't just about land, it was about power, prestige, and access to resources and markets. But this scramble for empire came at a cost, creating tensions that would continue to plague these regions long after the colonial powers had retreated. Chapter 5, The Spark, Sarajevo, 1914. Now imagine the city of Sarajevo on a sunny June morning in 1914. The city is alive with the hustle and bustle of daily life, yet there's an undercurrent of excitement in the air. The air is thick with anticipation, the streets adorned with flags and bunting, for Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is visiting. The city is dressed in its finest, ready to welcome the royal guest. He's a controversial figure, seen by some as a reformer, by others as a symbol of oppression. His presence in Sarajevo is both a cause for celebration and a source of tension. But on this day, he's simply a man on his way to a meeting, unaware that he's driving into the pages of history. The motorcade, a symbol of imperial power, winds its way through the city's narrow streets. The motorcade makes its way through the crowded streets. People line the sidewalks, waving and cheering, eager to catch a glimpse of the Archduke and his wife, Sophie. But amidst the cheering crowds, a group of conspirators lies in wait. Members of the Black Hand, a secret society committed to Serbian nationalism, have a deadly plan. Their target, the Archduke himself. Among them is Gavrilo Princip, a young man whose actions will soon change the course of history. The first attempt fails. A bomb thrown at the Archduke's car misses its mark. The explosion injures bystanders, but the Archduke and his wife escape unharmed. But fate has other plans. The day is far from over, and the tension in the air is palpable. Later that day, as the Archduke's driver makes a wrong turn, a chance encounter brings the Archduke face to face with one of the conspirators, Gavrilo Princip. It's a moment of pure chance, yet it feels almost inevitable. In that split second, the world holds its breath. The tension is unbearable, as if time itself has stopped. A shot rings out, echoing through the streets of Sarajevo, a single gunshot that shatters the fragile peace. The sound reverberates, marking the beginning of a new and tragic chapter. Franz Ferdinand lies dead, assassinated in a city already teeming with tension. His death is not just a personal tragedy, but a catalyst for a much larger conflict. News of the assassination spreads like wildfire, igniting a diplomatic firestorm. The world watches in shock and horror as the events in Sarajevo set the stage for a global conflict that will change the world forever. Chapter 6. The Guns of August. The month of August, 1914, a month that began with the promise of summer, would soon descend into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. Austria-Hungary, emboldened by German support, issues an ultimatum to Serbia, a document so deliberately harsh that it's clear they're not really interested in a peaceful resolution. Serbia, backed into a corner, attempts to appease Austria-Hungary while preserving its sovereignty, but it's not enough. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Germany, bound by its treaty obligations, declares war on Russia, which had begun mobilizing its vast army in support of Serbia. 2 days later, Germany declares war on France, its armies surging across the border into neutral Belgium. Great Britain, outraged by Germany's violation of Belgian neutrality, declares war on Germany. Within a matter of days, the great powers of Europe find themselves at war. The guns of August have begun to roar, signaling the beginning of a conflict that will consume the lives of millions. Archival footage of soldiers boarding trains, families waving goodbye, and battlefields. The causes of World War I were a tangled web of alliances, militarism, imperialism, nationalism, and a single act of violence. Together, these forces plunged the world into a war of unprecedented scale and destruction. Somber music and a quote from historian Barbara Tuchman, "The nations were caught in a trap of their own making." Understanding these causes helps us learn the lessons of history and reminds us of the fragile balance that keeps the peace.